This is the Savvy Investor Podcast. Hey there, Savvy Investors. I'd like to welcome you to another episode of the Savvy Investor Podcast, where we discuss all things real estate investing, provide you with invaluable market insights and expert advice to help support you to live the savvy life. I'm your host and founder of Savvy Investor, Mike Ponte, and today's podcast is really based on one key word, and that keyword is fear. Kind of crazy markets that we're living in right now, and some of them, there's a lot of fear. Fear of investing in a market that's extremely challenged right now, where we're seeing challenges, obviously, back east and to our good friends in Ontario and also our friends in Vancouver as well. These markets are being a little bit challenged. Even some of our colleagues that are listening to this in the US, there are areas that are being challenged. But could those be opportunities for people as everybody's kind of currently panicking in those particular markets? So as the old saying goes, be greedy when others are fearful and fearful when others are greedy, by Mr. Warren Buffett. But how do we overcome that fear as everybody's kind of exiting the door? How do we look at this as potential opportunities and not kind of follow the pack? Could this be a right time to be investing in those particular markets as people are starting to leave? The other thing that comes to fear is the fear of scaling our own real estate investing businesses. And these are doing things that we don't normally do. And specifically, being more visible in our community, especially when it comes to social medias. We have to do things differently. And if we're trying to scale, maybe raise money, build investment teams, or you're wanting to collaborate with other people, it's about being more visible, especially in this world. Social media is everywhere, and the world's not going to change or going to adapt to us. We have to adapt to it. And let's be honest, social media isn't going anywhere. So how do we be comfortable being uncomfortable? And trust me, even for myself, this was a really scary thing for me. Doing podcasts and videos like we're doing right now, this was not in my comfort zone by any means. But I see the benefit of this, and I see how people have grown, including myself. So for today's episode, we got a great guest, Kyle Guthro, joining us to learn about how he manages fear, especially investing in challenging markets, and also providing some great tips on how we all can be more visible and be on top of our game. Kyle is a seasoned real estate investor doing single-family properties, multifamily properties, short-term rentals, fix and he's done it all. He's done pretty much every single strategy, and he shares a lot of that in this episode, which is really cool. The other thing that's really cool is he's also an award-winning public speaker and has helped individuals and companies overcome fear to being more visible. So this may be a scary thing for people. He's an experienced speaker, speaking on stages literally all over North America, and I was also fortunate to share the stage with Mr. Grant Cardone himself. So in this episode, we're going to dive deep. We're going to get a chance to learn. We're going to be learning how to kind of embrace being adaptive, especially in different challenging markets, and how Kyle was been able to do this and look for the good that may be in the bad in those types of environments. So it's overcoming those fears and kind of following what everybody else is doing, which is panicking, and maybe start to look for the silver lining on opportunities. Also, in this episode, we're going to be talking about the importance of communication. This is a hot topic right now for a lot of people, is how do we become a little bit more enhanced in our communication skills so we can make a significant impact to the people that we are talking to, be it joint venture partners or be even being more visible on social media. Also, as part of this episode, we're going to be talking about building your network, and having a strong network within this industry is crucial. And again, this goes right back to communication and being more visible so we can grow and be more successful. And the last piece, and we're just touching on the surface of some of the things we're going to be talking about, is overcoming fear of being visible on social media. And so with Kyle, he is sharing a lot of his knowledge and providing some great tips so we can overcome that fear for ourselves. So this is a great episode, really, really is. And it's so beneficial, not just for real estate investors, but for everyone, because there's so many support tips that he's sharing and lessons. And I think you're really, really going to enjoy this episode. So you want to make sure that you listen to the very end. He's provided some great, great value. So before we jump in, I'd like to highlight this episode's sponsor. Today's episode is brought to you by our Savvy Investor trusted partner, Front Lobby. Did you know there's a way to empower your tenants, enhance your revenue, and ensure stress-free, timely rent payments? Well, welcome to Front Lobby. Front Lobby is the only platform that caters to both small and large housing providers and allows you to report both on time and unpaid rental data. For landlords, their platform will help you attract and retain responsible tenants who value the opportunity to improve their credit profiles. By reporting rent payments to major credit bureaus, Front Lobby helps tenants build their credit simply by paying their rent on time, which is a win for both landlords and tenants. If you would like to learn more about Front Lobby and how they can help you reduce late rent payments, visit their website at frontlobby.com or visit the show notes with the link to their website. Hey there, Savvy Investors. Got another episode here on the Savvy Investor Podcast. And guess what? We got an exciting guest. Kyle Guthro going to be joining us today. Kyle, welcome. Thanks for jumping on the show and joining us today. So how are you doing?
Excellent. Thank you for having me.
That's great. So, you know what? It's funny. I've been doing a little bit of research on you, as I do with most of our speakers. And my goodness, what portfolio of adventure you have, my friend. And so I know you're based in Ontario, but for a lot of our listeners, we're kind of coast to coast. And again, to be very clear, we've only got 4 listeners here, so there's not that many. So just feel rest assured. But for those 4 that are listening, maybe you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about yourself. Tell us a little bit about your real estate investing journey, and even more importantly, how do you manage being kind of a real estate investor, a coach, a speaker, and even actor as well? You know, I don't even know if you sleep anymore, but just share a little bit about yourself, what you do, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. Thank you. So yeah, just I'll give you the kind of Coles Notes version, and then we'll see where the dialogue takes us. But started my journey in the real estate investing space, right in the heart of the credit crisis, 2008. Got out of university, and my dad basically wanted to diversify his portfolio. Unbeknownst to me, he basically said, "We're going and buying a rental property," even though I just kicked the living snot out of my landlord's house back in university. But we ended up jumping into real estate, and I was working a corporate job. Uh, Absolutely kind of fell in love with the real estate space. And I'll dive into that story a little bit more on the journey of where I started. But yeah, like to answer your question, basically, I'm in the real estate space. I'm an investor, a licensed agent for 10 years. I can elaborate on that in a little bit. Uh, I don't know if I consider myself an actor. I've been in a TV show. Uh, but what's been really cool is that my opportunities have been kind of endless. They have popped up, and I'm a big yes person. If I'm unsure, usually the answer is yeah, I'll do it. So when I've got asked to be a correspondent on the Toronto International Film Festival, working the red carpets, interviewing celebrities, we can dive into that as well. And just basically the real estate investing space. I'm a coach in the communication and sales space, as well as the real estate investors. I do help some novice investors get into the real estate investing world because, as you know, it is sometimes full of sharks. And if you don't tread those waters carefully, this industry can beat you up. And we're witnessing it today in today's market.
Oh, yes, we are. It's amazing some of the stories that are out there too, especially back east. You know, I joke around with some of my marketing team here, and I'm just like, I don't know what goes on back east, but it's always these stories that are just absolutely crazy. But again, it's just population side. But you're right. There's a lot of sharks in this place, and I think it's really important to obviously find the right people to associate with, for sure. Yeah, yeah. So let me ask you. So tell me a little bit about your real estate investing journey. You've dabbled in a lot of different strategies as well. So maybe you can, you started 2008. Is it the same strategy that you're doing today in 2024? And maybe just tell us a little bit about the evolution and why.
Well, if you go in blindly and buy a house not knowing what the hell you're doing and hope that a tenant moves in, yeah, that strategy doesn't work anymore, unfortunately. Um, but yeah, I was kind of young, dumb, and naive, and uh, my dad and I were kind of just not really sure. We knew the process, like we're gonna renovate it, get it ready, and I really didn't want to be a landlord, but I did absolutely love working with my hands. Growing up, I was always that kid in the yard, landscaping, helping my parents around the house. My parents would build a basement, I'd be down there. So I always had an intrinsic passion towards architecture, engineering, construction. And it kind of was funny that I landed into this industry because my corporate job, I was a project manager in the utility space. So kind of different, but one and the same.
Hmm.
And so what had happened was, and a lot of investors in the room and the ones listening will attest to this, it was grind. It was literally, I was living at the time in Hamilton. My job was in downtown Toronto. I was commuting 2 hours each way. And then I would come home, gobble some food on the road, and I'd go straight to the rental property. And it was like, okay, all hands on deck. And I was doing a lot of the work. We didn't have the big budget to go hire huge amounts of trades, laborers, and the like. So we were doing the work. And it was a lot of sleepless, long weeknights. I was a zombie at work. And then working every weekend for about a good 8 weeks. But I learned a ton along the way. And kind of fast forward, I got my flavor of this was back in like 2007. You're renting houses for $1,000, like a house, $1,000. Like that doesn't even get you a closet in Toronto now. But what had kind of accidentally happened along the journey is tenants were great, property was fine. 3 months in, we get a water leak. And I'm like, why the hell did I become a landlord? Why am I dealing with these headaches? And I'm like, I have a full-time job. I just got out of university. I should be partying. And instead, I'm at a house on a weekend dealing with a flood. But I'm glad that I fell into that world, because looking back now, it would be way harder to start that process today. Like, to give context, that house now would be 750, 800,000 when we were buying in the middle of the credit crisis for like 150, 160. So, and that's when banks were literally giving you money to say, what's a credit report? No worry, here's a loan. Uh, so, and then kind of a little bit fast forward into the real estate journey is that in 2010, I wanted to go buy a place for myself in Hamilton. So a lot of new development happening in and around the Hamilton Mountain. Ended up buying a townhouse, brand new, off of a developer, but it took like a year to develop. Delays. And at the time I was seeing someone and we were going to move in together, but we broke up. And I ended up moving into that property for 2 months, thinking this was going to be my like starter home, and bought all the furniture, got everything ready. And I quickly realized, I'm like, you know what? I've always wanted to live in Toronto. I'm done. I'm done with Hamilton. I'm done with the commute. Everyone was kind of shocked. My parents were like, what the hell are you doing? And
Yeah.
I'm like, no, this is my chance. I was like, this is a sign. So I thought, you know what? If I can get it rented, then I'll move to Toronto. I put it up on Kijiji. I must have had 20 inquiries in a matter of 2 days. And I'm like,
Wow.
what the heck is going on here? And again, back in 2010 and 11, when properties were so cheap, mortgages were really low, and the
Yeah.
rents seemed to be very competitive. I was like, wow, there's clearly a market for this. Ended up going back to the developer saying, hey, do you have any more of these? Oh, yeah, we got phase 2 coming. Let me know. I'd be interested. Went in, soon as it came out with the grant, because we had previous purchaser. I was a previous purchaser. He gave me first right. I went in, I said, I'm going to take that one, and I'm going to take that one. And he's like looking at me like, people don't buy two homes. And then I brought my brothers into it, and I'm like, guys, you have to buy on this street. So my brothers and I have 2 younger brothers. We ended up buying 3 houses on the same block street. And then I just kept following that developer. That developer went from Stony Creek to then Paris to then Brantford. And I just would jump on this new development train, because the greatest gift that world gifted me was in that development space. At that time, you only had to put like 5% down.
Oh, the good old days.
So I was securing a new development townhouse with like 20 grand, and they weren't building it for another year. And I didn't care, because by the time they built it, the equity on the property had already gone up like $50,000 to $75,000. So I kind of found this little niche that I was in called new development. And they were all the exact same townhouses. Almost all my townhouses are identical. And I knew what worked, what people were looking for, what finishes they wanted, what upgrades, what appliances. And it was so easy finding tenants. So that's kind of how I got in. I got into real estate investing, learned the flipping and the ugly side of it really early, but then the actual buy and hold strategy kind of was by an accident. And the, again, sometimes going through adversity creates the biggest opportunity. And at the time, I'm so pissed off that my relationship failed at that time. We were supposed to move in together, and wow, what a massive turn of events that worked in an unbelievably positive direction. So that's kind of to answer the question. That was my buy and hold strategy. Then, as the years progressed, the buy and hold got a little bit more tricky, especially in like I was still buying in 13, 14, 15, 16, kind of now different developers. And what I noticed was like in 2017, people were making a lot of money off flips. And because that's when the market was really taking off. And I was like, well, I'm pretty handy. I'm in construction, but it's the construction world is very, very time consuming. And it is very, you got to have thick skin in that industry. Now, I'm thankful that I was in a project management job and role where I dealt with a lot of personalities, a lot of different individuals from high school dropouts to literally PhD engineers. So I had a plethora of different people and how to work with them. But the blue collar in the trade world is definitely a different beast. If these guys can sniff when you're inexperienced, and they not that they'll take advantage of it, but you got to stay on top of construction projects because they will quickly balloon out of their budgets, and they will quickly the schedules will go through the like way out of delays. So yeah, I have kind of in doing so when I was doing flips, uh, my one business partner and I, we actually started a company and we were focusing on residential real estate, and then eventually made our way into the multifamily space and bought a sixplex in Hamilton. So yeah, I've kind of done quite a bit in the real estate space. I've done buy and hold. I've raised money. I've done multifamily. I've done Airbnbs. I have an Airbnb right now. Um, yeah, they're all kind of different strategies, but I often tell people it's best sometimes to just go all in on one, but you have to sometimes pivot with the market because the buy and hold strategy does not work in today's market. The interest rates are way too high, the rents aren't covering. So you got to think of creative solutions to make the real estate work in 2024.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And again, we've talked about this a lot on the show here is pivoting. We've had to pivot in a lot of different directions, some markets needing to do so more than others. And actually, it's great that you provided this kind of this summary. And, you look here even in BC, what's happening with short-term rentals, what a great strategy that initially was. And then the government's just kind of like chopping it. And unfortunately now putting people in an awkward position. Now they're needing to pivot. How do they keep this as a viable business? And to your point, it's like that if they converted this to a long-term rental, it just does not cover it. Am I willing to lose $400 or $500 a month? Which you've been able to adapt with a lot of different strategies. And you are a realtor as well, right, Kyle? In Ontario. So maybe I can kind of dig into that a little bit as a realtor. You I would assume you're working with a lot of investors as well as others. Is there maybe a unique strategy that's maybe better suited for kind of the challenging market that we're seeing in Ontario? And I've talked about this in another previous podcast as well. As it's we're dealing with some challenging times. There's some really interesting things. Affordability is a big issue, and at the same time, we're seeing these interest rates going up, and my and not even to mention the landlord tenancy branches, especially in Ontario, of what's going on and trying to evict tenants. It's kind of a dog and pony show in a lot of ways. Are you what are you seeing yourself, and is there a specific strategy that's maybe better suited for the Ontario market than others? Is there one strategy or two strategies that you're saying is maybe better suited than another one?
Well, and here's the thing. I often tell clients, other investors, people that I work with, that I always want to know what's your initial goal with real estate. And if it's, I want to make passive income so I can buy a Lambo, wrong industry. Real estate is a get rich slow, not get rich quick. So I often tell people, even if you bought at the height of the market last year and overpaid, if you do not need to sell and you can weather this storm of these crazy interest rates, in 5 to 10 years, I can guarantee it will be worth more. Now, if they're saying, "Yeah, I wanna flip," this is where speculation comes in, and this could be potentially a good market now for flipping again, because you're starting to hear grumblings now, and especially as a real estate agent, you're definitely seeing a lot more traction in the industry, which as that because that demand has just been pent up. A lot of people that could have qualified 2 years ago for an $800,000 mortgage can't even get by now with a $500,000 mortgage. Well, I'm I mean, I'm biased because 'cause I'm in real estate, but I believe soon as we get 1 or 2 interest rate drops, consumer confidence will come back, people will then start entering the market, and then you're gonna start seeing, that pent-up demand get brought in. But here's the problem with Ontario. I'll speak just to Ontario. We aren't going to see the butterfly effect of this until about 2 years from now, maybe three, because all these construction projects have now either stopped or paused because interest rates are too high for them for lending. So they're like, we're going to pause our project or cancel it altogether. Guess what that's doing? That needs 3 to 4 years for them to build it and get it ready. By the time the market picks back up, and now all these developer and construction people try to enter back into the market because interest rates are lower, it's going to take them another 3 years. So now we're going to have a huge issue with supply and demand again, and it's going to create a massive influx in price. And I believe rents are going to go up again because interest rates will never hit back down. I shouldn't say never. Most likely will not hit 2% again. So we're going to be constantly creating that now kind of an equilibrium of growth, as opposed to when interest rates were really low, rents were really low. And then when interest rates were really high, the rents went through the roof. So I think as they kind of now just soften, we'll see stuff steady out. Like rents were crazy high in Toronto. I'm going to bite my tongue on Ontario in terms of the landlord tenant board. I do believe they are creating a massive problem that doesn't need to be there. It shouldn't take 9 months or 12 months to evict someone for default in payment. And what the scary part is, and for those that are listening across Canada, is this cash for keys in Ontario is getting out of control. And for those that don't know what cash for keys is, basically you want your tenant to move out, but they're refusing to, either because you want to sell the place or you have ultra low rents. Cash for keys is an incentive to give your tenants, here's $10,000, leave. And you give them the cash on the day they move out. Because there's no incentive for a tenant to move out right now. They're paying record low rent, and we're rent controlled in Ontario. So a lot of landlords were offering 10, 15, 20,000. But here's the problem. The cash for keys number was getting substantially higher, to the point where I was hearing like $50,000, $60,000. And I'm like, this is wrong. You shouldn't, as a landlord, as a mom and pop landlord, I'm not speaking to the commercial lenders like BlackRock and stuff, but a lot of the real estate investors in Canada are your everyday working class mom and pop people. And to sit there and think the landlords are the big bad evil people is not necessarily true. Yes, rents have gotten out of control too. I understand that. But I don't we're going to make this unattractive for investors to invest in Ontario. I'm an example of this. I won't do residential investing anymore in Ontario because where's the benefit? Now, I'm not saying I won't do multifamily, like a sixplex and above, different type of lending, different type of risk, but I'm now hearing a lot of experienced, well-known investors in Ontario that are some of my friends that have very big portfolios that are completely leaving Canada. And they're going down to the United States. They're exploring Mexico. They're exploring the Caribbean. Colombia is being a hot spot. And they're sitting there kind of scratching my head going, it's not so much the affordability of Ontario. they're terrified of the eviction process in Ontario. And you're just sitting there going, okay, we have a massive problem coming. And I speak from the heart because I believe in this, but the immigration is not stopping. And I say, you know what, welcome everybody in. But we are not building fast enough. We're not building enough homes. And the government is getting in the way sometimes, not all the time, sometimes, with these ridiculous fees. Don't quote me, don't I'm paraphrasing, but I believe the development costs in Toronto alone, I believe I should double check this before saying this. I think it quadrupled in 10 years. So imagine trying to build and the fees are astronomical. Like the taxes on development, I believe, is more than their profits. So you're discouraging a lot of investors, developers, construction, and we need that for the economy.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, Ontario is a bit of a tough place. Yes, we do have population growth, which is always going to be a great thing for us, especially being one of the biggest cities in North America in Toronto. But it is going to be interesting how things kind of unfold in the next 3 to 5 years. Maybe there might be that big boom again in Alberta. You're hearing a lot about that
A
because they
lot.
have word
Yeah.
friendly laws. Um, yeah, so it's Ontario's a interesting beast. But I always still tell investors, don't be discouraged by that because you can make any type of real estate work, but you just have to now really be prepared for the risks. Where I am guilty of this, and I
Hmm.
will fully admit this as a very long-term real estate investor and as an even as an agent, I did not think interest rates could go up as fast as they did.
No, me too.
No way. I
Yeah.
even thought in my head, if they raise interest rates that much, they'll bankrupt our country or they'll bankrupt the economy. And we survived. Like they went up 4 basis points and we're resilient. Like we just kept plugging away.
Yeah.
So it just shows you the tenacity of the Canadian real estate market.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know what? It should have dropped housing by 50%, but it didn't.
Yeah.
So it just shows that as Canadians, I feel like we're pretty good with our money. Like we just find ways to make it work.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, should there be different policies put in place? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you got to look out for yourself and do what's right for your portfolio.
There's a lot to unpack what you said, and there's so much that's there that just resonates like big time. And I think the biggest thing for those that are listening, and for some of our new investors, and for some people that are based back east and a lot, you guys may have never heard of like cash for keys before, and you may not be have heard of what's going on in Ontario. But just to kind of give you a summary of what Kyle's just highlighted, is we've got tenants there that are living in these units for like 8, 9 months and are not paying rent. They can't get evicted because they can't get to the courts. And so it's taking about 9 months to 10 months just to get in front of them to evict them. And so they're literally holding a lot of landlords hostage right now. And they're like, well, you know what, Kyle, if you want me to leave, I know it's been 5 months. If you want me to leave, you got to cut me a check for like 20, 30, $40,000. I've even heard a number as 100 grand, right? 100 grand. I don't know if that ever happened, but it was in the news. But that was pretty serious and pretty severe. And I think for a lot of people, for a lot of investors, and I'm hearing a lot of this too, Kyle. It's just like people are just like, I am not investing here at all in Ontario. Not. I am going to other markets that are landlord friendly, better opportunities for whatever reason. I am not doing this here. And I agree with you. I think it's going to create some issues from an inventory perspective for rentals because people are just going to sell their homes, but the migration hasn't changed. There's going to be a bigger problem. And guess what's going to happen when there's not much inventory and you've got a bunch of migration that's going to happen? Guess what's going to happen with rents? I'll let you take a guess and throw it in the chat there, guys, that's listening. But it's not good. It's going to be a problem. There's going to be more problem because there's not a lot of incentives for the purposes of developing. And who's going to want to buy something like that if there's all of these challenges and obstacles you have to go through? So I think there's going to be what's the right word for this? There's going to be some coming ahead at some point in time because government's going to want investors to buy and to build and to do these things to add more inventory. Government cannot continue to uh, manage a lot of the rentals or provide rentals. That the public sector has to be able to provide. But right now, it's just not being very attractive to facilitate that. And Ontario, unfortunately, is it's kind of it's a challenge. It's a big challenge right now, right? And I think the other part I want to highlight is this, and I've got some difference of opinion from others, and it's kind of interesting as people are like, you know what? I hope they go to Mexico. I hope investors go to Colombia. I hope they go to the States because guess what? That just means more opportunities and inventory for me. And I don't know what's your thoughts about that. People kind of saying something like that. Do you think there might be opportunities? You've been doing this for a while, right? So
Um, oh yeah, there's that's the beautiful thing about real estate. It never ends. You
yeah,
could invest anywhere in the world now, especially in our digital era. It's easier more than ever to get into a different industry, different country, especially with technology. We'll
totally.
eventually be able to speak Spanish just through our phone.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, I have a feeling technology will definitely help that process. But that being said, I did want to add to this that it's not. Don't hear this as landlords complaining about tenants. We're not. We are not
Not at all.
complaining about tenants
Not at
because
all.
I'm very grateful. I actually call my tenants clients.
Very good.
I treat my tenants exceptionally well because I also hear the horror stories of the tenants world. Landlords not fixing things,
So true.
landlords not taking care of things, they're not replying, they're not responding, things are broken.
Yeah.
They're jacking up the rents. Now there is some greedy landlords out there too, but also just recognize I, I sometimes the news sensationalizes this and it's like the landlord versus tenant and I'm like,
Mm,
why are you guys doing this? Why are you creating a dog and cat fight? It's
exactly.
not, we're supposed to work together.
Totally.
Because a lot of times where my tenants will actually reach out to me saying, hey, we understand this literally happened. I understand that the mortgages have gone through the roof. I'm sure you've been impacted. I don't want to be, because they've heard landlords sold their house. They're like, we really love this house in this neighborhood. We don't want to leave, but we understand that if you have to sell because of cash flow issues, let us know. We have no problem paying a little bit more in rent to
Mhm.
offset that. I'm like, wow, what did I do to deserve such an incredible tenant?
Yeah. It's true.
They ask to pay more so that they don't get evicted.
Yeah.
And as a landlord, do you not think that I'm going to want to work extra hard for them now, knowing that they're going to they're taking care of the property, they care about the neighborhood. I'm very strict in my selection process of my properties.
Yeah.
And yes, I still do it because I want to know who's in there. I want to build that relationship with them. Now, some people are like, why are you managing your own? That's just that part that I like doing.
Yeah.
Um, but I will say this, like landlords, tenants, we got to work together.
Yeah.
And I also recognize, yeah, your rents have also gone up from 2000 to 2800. It's tough. I get it. Um, Without getting into the government debate of policy and stuff, there's always going to be a plethora of investment opportunities.
Yeah.
I just tell real estate investors this, and even business owners, you have to be prepared for when things go really, really south.
Mm,
So when I tell investors, hey, when you buy your first investment property, put 6 months of cash aside in a separate bank account. Every property of mine is in a separate bank account. I always tell this to investors.
same
First thing,
way.
you should never mix personal.
I agree.
Keep it in a separate bank account. And here's the thing: before you even put a tenant in there, put 6 grand worth of rent in there. Not so much rent, your expenses in there. That's your sleep at night fund.
Mhm.
And for some, that might be like 15, 18, $20,000. But when a tenant stops paying or something breaks and you need a new roof that's $7,000, that funds are there.
Yeah.
It's too many people, especially in the height of the market. They
Yeah.
they always just thought it was going to keep going up 5% every month, and I'm like,
Totally.
as an investor, I'm like, this is not right. Just as quickly as it goes up, it quickly can fall.
Totally.
And when the greed was in the market in 2021 and 2, I actually wasn't buying. I was like, I'm staying the hell away from this market. I actually sold. I
Hmm.
sold my sixplex at the absolute perfect height of the market.
Yeah.
and it was kind of by accident. So I can't take credit that I was like had a crystal
Oh, you
ball.
can gloat a little bit. We'll allow that,
I
right?
was completely by accident.
Awesome. Really good stuff. And I agree with you 100%. And it kind of almost comes to the topic. And actually, before I jump into that, Kyle's bang on right. There are great tenants, and the majority of them are. The majority of them are. And there are really good landlords. But yeah, but then you get that small percentage that are not, and they are trying to take advantage of the system. And you see landlords doing exactly the same thing too. Okay. But that's the ugly stuff that tends to go all over the news and all over the media and all over social media. And there's probably a lot of reasons why situations like that have happened is maybe not screening the tenants properly or whatever the situation is. And if this is happening to you, we're not knocking that this is not a problem. It's a problem. There's issues in the system in itself. But to be very clear, even myself, I have a lot of amazing tenants. Truly, I treat them the same way, Kyle, as they are clients of mine. Truly, and I think it's almost kind of a good segue too. And I think it's part of dealing with some of these challenges and some of the things that you are a speaker of is based on communication and the importance of communication. And I think we know even before we jumped on here, we were talking about the importance of communication from a digital perspective and being visible and everything like that. But I want to take it down a different road, is just the communication with tenants. Letting them understand our situation and also taking the same time to communicate back on understanding where they're coming from too. And to your point is, it's a partnership. This is really it. Is we're trying to provide value to our clients. Great word. These are clients of ours that are going to give us thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars a year. Think about that. They're paying your mortgage. Why aren't we taking care of them? And I think part of it is, for myself, we've had to do the same thing, is we've had to communicate to them to better understand. And I guess I'll throw that out to you, Kyle, is communication. This is something that is kind of near and dear to your heart, and the importance of this. How important is communication in the world of real estate investing these days?
Super important. And the reason why I emphasize super is because the generation, and I'm not knocking them, the generation that's coming behind me and the Gen Zs, they grew up with a cell phone in their hand,
Yes,
literally from birth.
from birth,
So for them, a lot of their mode of communication is through Snapchat, Instagram,
so true.
WhatsApp, text. You're losing that dialogue of how to communicate and articulate your message clearly over a Zoom, in person,
Yeah,
or even just from stage. A lot of investors are like, you're going to have to be able to speak in front of people because you're going to have to potentially raise money. You're going to have to be able to talk to lawyers, to accountants, to your tenants, and just to find and put a bow on that last subject that we were talking, because I think it's super important, is one of the big insights I gained from real estate was, if you treat your tenants like clients, like as if you were a business owner, you'll look at them differently. Because if you owned a storefront and a tenant came in, or a person came in, and you say you own a mechanic shop, and a person came in and said, "My car's broken." The mechanic's not going to sit there and go, "Well, what the hell did you do? What do you mean it's broken?" It's like, usually 9 times out of 10, the complaints that come forward are because of your house. Oh, the dishwasher's broke, or the washing machine is breaking, or my lights aren't turning on. Landlords, don't complain about that. I know it sucks, but that's part of business. Your clients, aka your tenants, have a complaint, an issue that you need to address. So when I kept always thinking, okay, my client, who I want to keep ultimately very, very happy, especially in Ontario, knowing they have
yep,
so much power, I will bend over backwards. When something breaks, my response time is within 4 hours. Now, depending on when they respond, if it's an emergency, it's within like an hour. I'll never forget it. This happened last year. Real quick story. Furnace broke on Christmas Eve
oh
at
my
one of my
god,
rental properties. I'm like, of all
of
times.
course, yeah,
And then my tenants, who are absolutely incredible people, I'm like, guys, I can't guarantee I can try and get a technician out there, but I'm going to do everything I can.
yeah,
I must have called 12 HVAC companies. I'm like, I don't care what it costs. They were hosting Christmas, and I didn't want as a landlord, I'm like, no, I need to deliver on this. I ended up finding an HVAC guy to actually do the work. I think he charged me like almost triple time, but I didn't
Sure did.
care
Yeah.
because I knew my tenants couldn't go out without a furnace. Like it was, especially when it was super cold last Christmas last year. It just made me feel really good that there was a problem. I solved it, and doesn't matter if it was a tenant or not. It's my client.
Yeah.
So if you kind of go in with a different mindset, or if you don't want to do those things, hire it out, hire property management, or you can pay your way out of any problem. It's just a matter of how much you want to pay.
Yeah. I
uh,
agree. Yeah. I agree.
so yeah, communication is super, super important in the real estate space because you're going to need to be able to articulate messaging to potential joint venture partners, your tenants, accountants, lawyers, bookkeepers, other investors, real estate agents. You're going to need to know how to like negotiate. Yeah, you know what? I don't want to pay this price. How about this price? Like communication is hopefully not becoming a lost art. I call it an art because it is something that's near and dear to my heart. Um, Absolutely love learning about communication. I've been professionally trained. I've been gifted a lot of great opportunity to speak on a lot of stages across the
Yeah.
country and even into the United States on a variety of topics. But I will say that if you can communicate clearly, you're definitely at a bigger advantage than if you could not. Now, I
Yeah.
know, especially in our digital era, we've all been there. You communicate over text and the tonality is not there, the inflection in the voice, you can't see the person, you can't read body language. And then guess what happens? A lot of fights happen over text. And I'm like, this could have been avoided if you could just see the person. And could see like the way you say, don't do that versus don't do that. Like they're completely different. I apologize for yelling. But yeah, so communication for me is it's gifted me a lot of great opportunities. I've been able to speak on stage with Grant Cardone in front
Yeah.
of thousands of real estate investors. Uh, I was invited to speak at a talk in Miami on, which was funny, the dating space. Uh, that was an interesting one. But communication is in every industry, in every walk of life. Doesn't matter where you are, even when you're traveling. Try communicating with someone in a different country with a different language. You're now going to need to rely on body language to get you through. You're going to need to rely on possibly learning a language. So, for audience members, for your people that are listening as an investor, I think it is very critical that you work on communication skills. And a lot of people are like, I'm a good communicator. I challenge them. And the reason why is because there's a lot of people that I will meet and converse with, and I'll ask them the age old question. So, what do you do? And then they're like, oh, I'm a real estate agent. And I'm like, cool. You actually did nothing to get me hooked, interested, ask a question. So I work with a lot of clients, entrepreneurs, companies on how to pitch from stage, how to share their message, how to sell from stage, because a lot of people answer the same question. What do you do? And it's always the same boring response. How do you hook them? If you were walking, if you had 30 seconds with Elon Musk, you wouldn't just say, I'm a real estate agent. If you had 30 seconds with the most influential people in the world, you wouldn't say, I'm just a mortgage broker. So it's working on crafting that pitch and then articulating it in a way that makes them want to ask a subsequent question. And I learned a lot of this from being on the red carpet with actors, directors, writers, composers. You had to really think on your feet because a lot of times you'd ask them a question and they'd pull you in a different direction. And it's like, okay, I'm gonna wait. I'm gonna run with this. You probably can attest to this as being a podcast host. I probably took this in a different direction, and you're now having to think, okay, what's a subsequent question I need to ask? But here's the magical and beauty about communication. It's not what we speak and say; it's how we listen.
Exactly. 100%. And in all facets of what you've just said, I think there was a couple key things that really stuck out to me is the art of communication because that resonated well with me because I've got two kids that one's in 21 years old and one's 19. And it's your point. Literally, pretty much at birth, there was a phone in this kid's hand as they're coming out. It's just what it is, right? And they're so used to texting and messaging and all that stuff. And there's this lack of skill set in verbal communication, which is extremely, extremely powerful. And I think the communication in our business is all about building relationships. Guys, if there's one industry that is relationship based, it's ours. It's relationships with our existing tenants, it's relationships with our realtors, our lawyers, our accountants. And again, it's building and harnessing those relationships in a very effective way. And without good open communication, you're not going to have a lot of success at all, period. And I think to your point, too, Kyle, is just like you took it down kind of a different road too, which I'm happy you did, because it's true. There's a lot of people that are listening right now. They're looking to kind of scale their business. They're looking to grow their business. And part of the obstacle they have is getting some visibility. And you've said this digital world right now is all about communication and building relationships. And when it comes to communication is visibility. And so there's a concern about being visible. There's a concern about being open to communicate. There's a concern that, you know what, I don't have enough experience or knowledge to kind of to communicate on real estate investing because I just don't have that knowledge and experience. So they immediately put this big roadblock or this big boulder in front of themselves and say, well, because I don't have that experience or knowledge, I just can't do it until 10 years later or whatever the case may be. And I think this actually pushes, um, they may be excellent communicators. They, maybe with their personal settings or their spouse or friends or whatever, but there's a lack of maybe potential confidence in communicating. And I want to kind of maybe go down that road a little bit is, we've talked about the communication side comes to tenants and building relationships. And it's important to have those relationships. But for individuals that are maybe listening to this and they're like, okay, you know what, I'm kind of in the next step in my career because I'm buying a property in Belize, but I need to raise money and I need to be more visible. And I hear that from coaches and stuff. How do you overcome that situation to be a better communicator and more importantly, have the confidence that somebody's wanting to listen to you, even if you don't have that
Oh, that's
experience
a
or
great
knowledge?
question. And you know what? I actually just did a talk on this last weekend, and it was an unbelievable event focused on entrepreneurs. And I will say this as a communication expert, people actually aren't fearful of failure. They actually don't fear failure. They fear failure in front of others, which is then in turn is
Mm,
fear of judgment. So I put this to
very
the
good.
audience. If you could fail, you could try anything, but you'll fail miserably. Would you do it? No one put up their hand. But if I said, okay, you could do that exact same thing and nobody, not a soul would find out, would you do it? Everybody's hands went up. See, we actually don't fear the problem or failing or screwing up. We fear the judgment and the opinions of others. Some we don't even know who the hell they are, and their opinions, which don't ultimately matter. So,
Yeah.
what I do as a communication coach is I help you get over that fear. You know what? Why public speaking is the number one fear in the world? It's because you're constantly being judged. And guess what
Mm,
judgment stems
yeah.
from? Ego. We don't want to look bad. We don't want to screw up. We don't want to tarnish ourselves because our ego is screaming at us going, you got to be perfect. You got to fit this persona. You got to do this certain thing. And I tell people, remove the mirage. Remove the facade that you can't screw up. So if you want to get and pull out your phone and become a YouTuber or talk or speak to, you know what? You know what I tell people? Speak to your experience and speak to your story. Because as a public speaker, their opinions can't really rob you of that. Now, if you start coming out rhyming off facts, figures, and data, yeah, be careful because they can challenge that. They're going to be, where did that source come from? Where's that information? But
Yeah.
if
Very
I
good
sit
point.
there and tell you
Yeah.
my story, it's my story. But here's what's amazing about that as a public speaker. We're captivated as an audience is captivated by that said story. We love hearing about the basement or the garage story of how Apple came to be, how Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak were
Mm,
sitting in a
oh,
garage building Apple. We love hearing that. So when I work with clients and I tell them, what is your story? What is the message? Don't worry about telling me about the app or the data or the algorithm right now. Where did you get the idea to build this?
Yeah.
Why did you get into real estate investing? Tell me about a time that you were faced with an adversity or an obstacle and you had to overcome it. See, that's what people go to these events for. This is why they listen to podcasts, because they want to be educated. And the
Yeah.
fastest way to learn and grow, in my opinion, is to hire a mentor or coach that is doing or done what you want to achieve,
Want to do. Yep.
and learn. Be a student, be a ferocious student. I am still constantly trying to learn from the best out there. There's a gazillion entrepreneurs that you can follow, and a lot of their content is free on YouTube. People gatekeep themselves and saying, oh, when I get here, or when I do this, or when I do that. The quickest way to grow is through actually doing it. And if you're terrified of public speaking, hire a coach that will help you get over that crux. And I was grateful that I was professionally trained. I got into groups such as Toastmasters.
Great group.
And it's just honestly getting over that fear of judgment. And what I often tell people, though, you know how you get over that fear? Just by doing it, which is putting in the reps. You become a good public speaker by speaking more. You become a good real estate investor by buying more or investing more. And I'll share this because I'll never forget it. When I first got that call about the flood, oh my God, my heart sunk. I could not sleep. I was panicking. What am I going to do? How am I going to pay for this? Who do I call? Now, tenant calls me, issue came up, no problem, send somebody over. It's at the point where I don't even tell my appliance guy, how much is it? Just go do it and send me the invoice after. Because I built that relationship that I trust him, and he loves it because I send him work all the time. But once you put in the reps of those problems, you now know how to deal with them. So when I tell people, if you want to become a better communicator, you want to be a better public speaker, you want to speak in front of people because you need to raise capital, go do it. And I learned quite a bit of it in sales, working with Grant Cardone and his sales team. Man, you hear no a lot. Like, you get the phone hung up on you. We were doing cold calling. Man, that was cold calling. You learn a lot. Like, it humbles you quickly. But man, like door-to-door knocking, like I know a lot of real estate agents do that. It almost becomes like a game. At first, you take it personal, but I tell people, don't take this personal. It's just business. And you might have caught someone at a bad time. You might have caught someone at a, you know what? They didn't care for your product or service. But I will say, I think people give up on themselves a little too quickly. Like, or they go jump to the next shiny penny. It's like, oh, real estate's not working. I'm going to Forex. I'm going to crypto. And then it was NFTs. And then it's like, whoa, stop chasing. Focus on one. Like, thank God when the NFT stuff was going crazy, I'm not going to lie, for a minute, I thought maybe I should invest. And I'm so glad I didn't. Because I knew, stay true to what I know, sales, communication, and real estate. So yeah, communication is, oh my God, I would say it's one of the most important things. And I welcome this to your audience members, whoever is listening. I'm sure there'll be a link for the afterwards. Go follow me on social media. Shoot me a DM, and I will give you a free 15-minute consultation. Absolutely free, no strings attached. 15 minutes, you can pitch me, and I will critique your pitch. And I guarantee I will find something that is not perfect in it that will make it stand out. And the reason why I'm so confident in this, and I get very passionate towards this, is because it has opened up so many opportunities for me. And I'll share a really quick story about how I got to meet Grant Cardone for the first time. And for those that don't know him, he's a big real estate mogul down in Miami. Huge. He's blown up. And I was climbing Mount Kilimanjaro in Africa, and no cell service. So I was listening to audiobooks, and I was listening to the 10X rule. And I remember Grant saying in his raspy voice, I think it was chapter 5, he's like, the chapter was, don't be a little bitch. And I started chuckling as I'm climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, 8 days. It's a brutal hike for those or climb that of those have done it. There's no running water. You're constantly exhausted. It's 12 hours a day of just pure hiking up a mountain. So I'm listening to Grant, and all I hear is, "Don't be a little bitch. Don't be a little bitch." And I said it to my head when I was climbing there, the mountain. If I ever meet him, I'm telling him this story. So I got introduced to a very close friend of mine through my close friend of mine. His name's Richard Dolan, absolutely incredible human being. And he's like, "Hey, Grant's holding an event in Toronto, or he's hosting speaking at an event in Toronto. I can get you backstage." Gets me backstage, and I'm like, he introduces me. I'm having a quick conversation with Grant. Elaine is there, his two kids. He has to jump. Richard has to jump, and I'm like, "Grant, can I share a quick story with you?" He's like, "Yeah, go ahead." So I start telling him the Kilimanjaro story. And he's like, "Oh my God, that's unbelievable." He's like, "This is crazy." So he gets ready to go up on stage in front of thousands of real estate investors. And I go back out and I'm watching him now speak. And he's like, "I met an interesting person backstage." He's like, "Where's Kyle?" In front of everyone. I'm like, "Oh shit." He's like, "Kyle." And I put up my hand him at the back. He's like, "Come here." I'm like, "Oh no." He's like, "Get this guy a mic." The AV guy hands me a mic. He's like, "Tell the whole audience what you just told me backstage." I was like, whoa. So in front of 3,000, 4,000 people, I forget what the number was, I got to share my story and how I met Grant. Now, it's so cool that that transpired. But what was even cooler about it is that I was prepared. See, often when people meet their celebrity people, they meet someone that they want to converse with or connect with, they're not ready. So I often tell people, what is your pitch? I have a 1 minute pitch, a 2 minute pitch, a 5 minute pitch. But here's the thing, make it about the other person. So many people come out of the gate saying, "I've done this. I. Make it about you." So, how did I get Grant's attention? I made the story about him and how his book helped me get up the mountain. So, when you're conversing with people, how can I serve you? How can I help you? How can I better your real estate investing journey? We're kind of in this self-centered, egotistical world called social media where everyone's got a megaphone saying, "Look at how
Yeah.
great I am." And I often tell people the reason why people are terrified of public speaking because they make it about them.
Yeah, it's
What is the
true.
audience saying about me? They're judging. When I just say, speakers, make it about your audience. It has nothing to do with you. You are just a person speaking and delivering education and information. If you make it about your audience, they are going to be left leaving impacted, engaged, probably even emotional if you're really good. So make it, if as a speaker, make it about your audience. When you're conversing with someone, make it about them. But obviously, when someone asks, "What do you do?" be ready. Be ready
Mhm.
to converse about that. So fast forward with that relationship that Richard Dolan brought together with Grant, we ended up building the Grant Cardone licensing program with a team
So
of like
cool.
other people, 5 other people, who I'm absolutely grateful for the opportunity, the things that we learned, the insights that we gained, and just spending a lot of time in Miami with Grant and his team. And man, you want to learn sales, go hang out with some of the top sales teams. They will. I thought I was decent at sales until I walked into that head office in Miami. I'm like, whoa, this is insane. So sales and communication are very near and dear to my heart because it has literally gifted so many cool opportunities because people are intrigued. They're like, "Oh, I want to come on your podcast," or "How can I serve your audience?" So I think that's why it's really critically important to have that pitch ready, but being able to communicate and articulate that clear messaging to audience, tenants, clients, family, kids, like the list goes on and on.
Yeah. Well, it's obviously you're very well spoken because man, that stuff is hitting home on all multitude of fronts. To be very frank, and guys, I hope you guys all listen to this because this the whole communication, building relationships, and just getting out of your own way to be frank and building your you just have to do it. It's just like anything. You got to practice exactly like you said. It's just you just got to try and you get better just by doing these things and just some great great information about how communication, building relationships has been able to open up doors even for yourself, Kyle. Get a chance to work with somebody like Grant Cardone, amazing. So I'm going to leave you with one last question, and I know we're kind of top of the hour here, and it's just amazing. I know we could probably be here for a couple hours with you, but truly, it's like great. What I always like to ask our speaker, our guests, is like, you all have wealth of wisdom in one way or another. Yours is obviously you got your real estate investing experience, just in regards to relationship building and communication. If you went to share some words of wisdom to our real estate investing community, savvy investor, what would be a bit of advice? It could be investment strategy. It can be anything that we just even discussed today. What would be your words of wisdom based on all your years of experience that people can really grasp after listening to this episode?
It's a famous quote, and I wish I knew off the top of my head who said it. But comparison is the thief of joy.
Oh, so good.
And
So
the
good.
reason why that one's important is because don't compare your day one to someone's day 1000. And we all get
Hmm.
caught in this, myself included, where you meet somebody at a real estate event and they're like, oh, yeah, I've got 100 doors. I'm like, shit, what the hell? Don't get envious and jealous. Be inspired and motivated. Ask them questions. Take them to lunch. Pay them. They clearly are doing something right. But don't rob yourself of what you have accomplished because someone else has done something bigger and better. And this is, especially in the social media space, this is in the
Hmm.
real estate space. A lot of people are like, man, I would love to be a podcast host. And they look to Joe Rogan. I'm like, man, he's got a
Yeah,
team behind him, probably millions of dollars spent on marketing and
guaranteed.
advertising to get top quality guests and all the like. Just record the first podcast. Just go out and buy the first property. Just go do the first workout. Just go have the first public speaking talk. Don't compare yourself because, yes, that is good for a tracking and metric and motivation and stuff, but I don't want it to rob people of what they're truly living in the moment.
Yes,
And there was lots of times where I'm like, I wish I was on stage in front of 20,000 people. When in
totally.
fact, it's like, whoa, ground yourself, be present, but also acknowledge your accomplishments. Because in the real estate investing space, man, it quickly catches up to you and you don't even recognize it. It happens where you just move to the next deal and the next deal and the next, you don't even celebrate it anymore.
Yeah.
And for me, it was like, whoa, I had to stop, pause, and just remind yourself you work hard for a reason. Celebrate those successes,
Yes.
celebrate those wins. And I'm not saying you got to buy material things, but if it means so much, because a lot of times the family, friends are at the demise of this and they don't get 100% of your attention. But what if you could say, hey, honey, husband, whoever, kids, I just made a big real estate transaction. Let's go on a weekend getaway. Now they're seeing the business differently. Or if you work so hard to buy that watch or whatever it is, or that car, celebrate it because it will quickly enrapture you in just saying, "Oh, I need to chase the next thing." That carrot will constantly be dangling and you'll never get it. And feel left unfulfilled. And then by the time this beautiful life comes to an end, you're sitting there scratching your head going, what did I do this all for?
What did I do it for? Yeah.
And I'm not saying sit at home and be lazy, but do recognize that celebrate the wins, learn from your losses, but don't get too high on your supply and don't get too low on yourself. Because as
Mhm.
entrepreneurs, it is a roller coaster ride. And I will leave it at that is that, you know what? They're just chapters in your book. And sometimes the greatest gifts are going through those adversities. But in the moment, it
Mhm.
could feel like it's catastrophic, like the
Yeah.
world is collapsing around you. But it just is on to the next chapter. That's what I always just tell myself. On to the next chapter. Ready to roll. The book of Kyle is not done yet.
Yep.
And the reason why I like using that book of Kyle as an analogy is because that is the legacy that will live longer than me. What is the legacy you want to leave behind for your kids, for your
Mhm.
grandkids? Because how cool would it be that in 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, your grandkids or your great grandkids could see content of you on
Yeah.
social media? I do feel sad for that generation before us. It's like they only had maybe like my grandparents passed. They had like 20 photos, 30 photos.
Yeah.
Shit. There could be hours on end of content of you
Yes.
for your legacy to live on, depending if that's what you want, if that serves you. So if you're nervous about getting on camera, doing something for the first time, worried about what you look like, don't worry. Just go do it. Because think about your family and the generation below you and how you could serve them.
That's a great way to look at that. And thank you for sharing that. And I hope that resonated with everybody because it did for me. Is being able to share, communicate, and being visible out there, not just for people, but for future generations within your own household as well, as that message of knowledge you're passing on for generation to generation. I think that's just wonderful. Kyle, amazing stuff. Like I said, we could be here all day, all night. It's just you've provided such great value, and I hope everybody's enjoying this. For those that want to kind of learn about you or follow you, where do you recommend them to go?
I hang out a lot on Instagram. You can follow me at Kyle Guthro, KYLEGUTHRO. All my socials are the same, KYLEGUTHRO. www.kyleguthro.com. Like I said, I'm very active on Instagram, very active on social media. I often tell those people, I want to be your cheerleader. So if you've got a problem, you've got a concern, I want to hear about it. And I say that because I've really kind of honed in and found out what my passion is, and it's serving and helping people. So if you've got an issue in the real estate space, sales, communication, business, entrepreneurship, and I used to be an ex-project manager, know how to take a plan from dream to execution to closeout. Whatever it is, I want to hear about it because I want to help you. And if I can't help you, I want to get the people connected to help, because I truly believe in an era right now that collaboration will always beat competition. And
Agreed.
there's plenty of business to go around, especially in the real estate investing space. So please reach out to me, follow along on the journey, ask questions. I do offer coaching in the sales, communication, and real estate space. All that information is on my socials. I have links in there to my store. If they want to ask more information or find out more, I have everything from one-on-one coaching, group coaching, to just even perfecting your pitch. I can promise you, I'm confident that I could change your mind on communication in a 30-minute phone call. I
Awesome.
guarantee it. So
Awesome. Awesome. And I think people should take him up because he offered that 15 minutes. Guys, take advantage of it. Why not? You've got that opportunity. And what we'll do as well is we'll make sure that in the description we'll add all of his socials and links directly there. So go check that out as well. So again, thanks so much for being part of the show. It really has been a treat. I've been just kind of memorized just listening to you, to be honest with you. It's been a real treat. Hopefully we can get you back on to on a show maybe in the future as well, if that's okay.
absolutely. And I will never turn down a snowboarding trip out to Whistler. So
Anytime, buddy. Anytime. Well, we got to wait for some snow to actually come
yeah,
out. So might be next year. So
yeah.
to all those that are listening in, we hope you guys enjoyed it, Savvy Investors, and stay tuned for our next podcast. Cheers. The views and advice expressed on this podcast episode are solely those of the individuals participating and do not necessarily reflect the opinions or beliefs of the podcast host, its producers, or affiliated parties. All content shared is for entertainment purposes only and should not be considered as professional, financial, legal, or investment advice. Listeners and viewers are strongly encouraged to conduct their own research and consult with qualified professionals such as financial advisors, lawyers, and accountants before making any financial decisions or investments based on the information provided in this podcast or any related content. The podcast host and producers disclaim any responsibility for any actions taken by listeners as a result of information presented in this episode. Viewer and listener discretion is advised.